Victoria Lang grabbed the mop from Daniel's hands and threw it across the hangar floor. "You think you belong here?" Her voice echoed off the steel walls. "You're nothing. You clean toilets. You empty trash. You're invisible, and that's all you'll ever be." 50 workers watched in silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Daniel Cross looked at the billionaire CEO, then at his 9-year-old daughter crying in the corner. He should have walked away. Instead, he rolled up his sleeve, revealing a scar that made Victoria's face go white. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "your father gave me that mop right before I saved his life. Comment the city you're watching from. Let me see how far this story travels." 3 days before the explosion. The mop hit Daniel's chest before he saw it coming. Victoria Lang stood 3 feet away, her arm still extended from the throw. Her eyes burned with a fury that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the ghosts she couldn't escape. "Pick it up." Daniel looked at the mop on the ground, looked at his daughter Maya in the corner. Her notebook clutched against her chest, tears streaming down her face. Looked at the 50 workers frozen around them, pretending not to see. He bent down, picked up the mop, said nothing. "That's what I thought." Victoria stepped closer. "You know what your problem is. You think because you show up every day, because you push that mop around, because you bring your kid to work, like this is some kind of daycare, you think that makes you valuable." Victoria. Richard Kane, the CFO, stepped forward with a thin smile. "Maybe we should—" "Shut up, Richard." She didn't take her eyes off Daniel. "I want him to hear this. I want everyone to hear this." She turned to address the hangar. This man, this janitor, let his daughter wander into a restricted testing zone. She was touching classified equipment, military prototypes worth more than every paycheck he'll ever earn combined. Maya's sob echoed across the concrete. Daniel's hands tightened on the mop handle. "She's 9 years old," he said quietly. "She's a liability." Victoria turned back to him. "And so are you. You think mopping floors in a jet hangar makes you special? Makes you part of something bigger?" She laughed. "You're not part of anything. You're what we step over on our way to actually mattering." The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel could feel every eye on him, could feel the weight of their pity, their relief that it wasn't them, their quiet gratitude that someone else was being destroyed today. He thought about his hands, the ones that used to hold scalpels, the ones that used to grip flight sticks at 30,000 feet, the ones that couldn't even hold his wife's hand when she died because the nerve damage made his fingers shake too badly. He thought about Maya, about the half sandwich she'd saved from lunch because she knew money was tight, about the shoes he'd been meaning to replace for 3 months, about the notebook full of jet engine drawings that she'd shown him last night, her voice bright with hope. "Maybe I can work here someday, Daddy. Maybe I can build planes." He thought about walking away. Then Richard Kane laughed. It was a small sound, controlled. The laugh of a man who enjoyed watching someone else bleed. And something in Daniel shifted. "You done?" His voice was calm, too calm. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me. I asked if you were done." Daniel set the mop against a tool cart. Slowly, deliberately. "Because when you're finished telling me everything I'm not, I'd like to tell you something about that jet." He pointed to the Apex prototype behind the glass partition. $400 million of aerospace engineering, the future of Vanguard Industries. The make-or-break demonstration that would determine whether Victoria Lang kept her father's company or lost it to the circling board members. "What about it?" Victoria's voice was ice. "It's going to explode." The hangar went silent. Richard Kane stopped smiling. Victoria stared at Daniel like he'd grown a second head. "What did you just say?" "The Apex prototype. Your engineers installed the second exhaust valve backwards. Happens when teams rush, when leadership pushes deadlines instead of safety." Daniel's eyes met hers. On the ground, it reads as a minor pressure deviation, 2% above tolerance. Nothing your automated systems would flag. How do you? But at 20,000 feet, that reversed valve creates a feedback loop in the combustion chamber. Pressure builds, temperature spikes, and somewhere between minute 3 and minute 5 of your Pentagon demonstration. He spread his hands. Boom! Victoria's face went red. You're insane. Check the valve. You're a janitor. Check the valve. Security. Victoria's voice cracked. Get this man out of my facility, now. 2 guards moved forward. Daniel didn't resist. He'd said what he needed to say. Now it was up to her. But as the guards grabbed his arms, Marcus Webb stepped out of the crowd. 63 years old. Gray beard. Limp from a helicopter crash in '86. The most senior engineer at Vanguard and the only man Victoria couldn't afford to ignore. Wait. The guard stopped. Marcus pulled out his tablet, fingers moving across the screen. His face went pale. Miss Lang. His voice shook. The second exhaust valve. He's right. It's reversed. The color drained from Victoria's face. That's impossible. We checked the specs. Nobody verified the physical installation. Marcus looked at Daniel with something like awe. How did you know? Daniel pulled free from the guards, straightened his uniform, walked to where Maya still sat crying in her corner. Lucky guess, he said over his shoulder. He took his daughter's hand. Come on, sweetheart. Time to go home. They walked in silence to the bus stop. Maya's hand trembled in his. Her face was red from crying, her notebook clutched against her chest like armor. Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart. Why did that lady hate you so much? Daniel watched the traffic pass, tried to find words that wouldn't break his daughter's heart. She doesn't hate me, Maya. She's scared. Scared of what? Of falling, of being weak, of looking in the mirror and seeing someone who isn't good enough. He squeezed her hand. When people are that scared, sometimes they hurt others to feel strong. Maya was quiet for a moment. Is that why you didn't yell back? Because you knew she was scared? Partly. What's the other part? Daniel looked down at his daughter. 9 years old, her mother's eyes, her father's stubborn chin. The other part is that yelling doesn't fix anything. It just makes noise. He crouched to her level. You want to know a secret? Maya nodded. The bravest thing I ever did wasn't flying jets or saving lives or any of the things people give medals for. The bravest thing I ever did was learn to stay quiet when everyone expected me to fight. That doesn't sound brave. That sounds sad. Daniel smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled in weeks. Maybe it's both, sweetheart. Maybe the bravest things usually are. The bus arrived. They climbed on, found seats in the back. Maya pulled out her notebook and started drawing. Daniel watched the city pass outside the window and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Ding! That night, Victoria stood in her father's office at 11 p.m., staring at the wall of photographs. Sterling Lang shaking hands with senators. Sterling Lang cutting ribbons at factory openings. Sterling Lang receiving awards, giving speeches, building an empire from nothing. And in the corner, almost hidden, Sterling Lang in military fatigues, standing beside a man in a flight suit. The photograph was old, faded. But Victoria had looked at it 1,000 times since her father's funeral, trying to understand why he'd kept it. Her phone buzzed. Miss Lang. The engineering team finished the diagnostic. The janitor was right. If we'd run the demonstration without fixing that valve... I know. Victoria's voice was hollow. Fix it, quietly. I don't want word getting out that a janitor caught something our engineers missed. Yes, ma'am, but how did he know that kind of diagnostic requires... I don't know, and I don't care. Just fix it. She hung up. But she did care. She cared very much. Who was Daniel Cross? How did a janitor know more about jet engine failure than a team of aerospace engineers? Why did he look at her with pity instead of fear when she was trying to destroy him? Victoria pulled up his personnel file on her laptop. Name: Daniel Cross. Age 36. Position: maintenance staff. Janitorial emergency contact: none. Previous employment classified. She stared at that word. Classified. Janitors didn't have classified work histories. That was military. Government. The kind of designation that meant someone somewhere had decided the public wasn't allowed to know what this man had done. Her phone buzzed again. Richard Kane. Victoria, we need to talk about the janitor situation. What situation? I handled it. You humiliated a man in front of 50 employees, a man who just saved the company from a $400 million disaster. Richard's voice was smooth. Too smooth. The board is going to hear about this. The board works for me. The board is looking for any excuse to remove you. You know that. Your father's death left a vacuum, and there are people, myself included, who question whether you're ready to fill it. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. Is that a threat, Richard? It's a reality check. Fire the janitor, quietly, before this becomes a story. Fire him. He embarrassed you in front of your employees. He showed them that you missed something critical. He made you look weak. Richard paused. Your father never looked weak. Not once. Not ever. The words hit like a slap. I'll handle it, Victoria said. She hung up and stared at Daniel's personnel photo. A tired face, sad eyes, the ghost of someone who used to be more. Fire him. It would be easy. One signature, one severance check, one problem solved. But those eyes. They reminded her of the photograph on her wall. The pilot standing next to her father. The man whose face she'd never been able to clearly see. Victoria pulled up her father's old emails, started searching. Kandahar, 82nd Medical Battalion, Operation Dustfall. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she had a feeling she was about to find it. Daniel's apartment, 2 a.m. Maya was asleep. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. Kandahar, 2009. The hospital bombing that ended everything. He'd been a flight surgeon with the 82nd Medical Battalion. Not just a doctor, a pilot too. Learned to fly during downtime because a crew chief named Rodriguez said he had steady hands and quick instincts, got his wings unofficially, flew combat missions when they were short on pilots. Then came the bomb. He remembered the explosion, the heat, the screaming. He remembered throwing himself over 3 wounded soldiers, feeling the shrapnel tear through his arms, knowing even as it happened that his hands would never be the same. The military gave him a Silver Star. The doctors gave him a diagnosis: permanent nerve damage, career ending. The Air Force gave him an honorable discharge and a pension that didn't cover half his bills. His wife Elena died 3 months later. Complications from childbirth. He was still in physical therapy, hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold a cup of water, couldn't hold her hand, couldn't say goodbye. He came home to a daughter he'd never met and a life that no longer fit. Daniel rolled down his sleeve, covering the scar. Covering the small tattoo beside it, a pair of wings with a medical caduceus. The insignia of the 82nd Medical Battalion. The last piece of the man he used to be. He checked on Maya one more time. She was sleeping with her notebook open, her pencil still in her hand. She'd been drawing again. A jet with the words, "Daddy's plane," written above it. He closed the notebook gently, pulled the blanket over her shoulders. "You'll fly one day," he whispered. "Higher than I ever did." Then he went back to his room and didn't sleep at all. The next morning, 2 days before the explosion. Daniel showed up for work at 6 a.m. He expected to be fired. Expected security to meet him at the door, hand him a box, escort him out. Instead, Marcus was waiting for him. "You're not fired," Marcus said before Daniel could ask. "Not yet, anyway." "Why not?" "Because Victoria Lang is many things, but she's not stupid. You saved this company $400 million and probably a few lives. Firing you now would make her look petty." Daniel grabbed his mop and bucket. "So what happens now?" "Now." Marcus fell into step beside him. "Now she pretends yesterday didn't happen, and you go back to being invisible." "I can do invisible." "I know you can." Marcus stopped walking. His voice dropped. "But I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." Daniel waited. "The 82nd Medical Battalion, Operation Dustfall. The hospital bombing in Kandahar." Marcus's eyes searched his face. "That was you, wasn't it?" Silence. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I was at the military gala in 2012. The one honoring the survivors. I shook hands with every man in that room." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed Daniel a grainy photograph. Third from the left. Same build, same jawline, same scar. Daniel looked at the photo, looked at his younger self in a dress uniform, medals across his chest, eyes already dead. "That man doesn't exist anymore." "The hell he doesn't. That man just saved this company. That man knew more about jet engine failure in 30 seconds than our engineering team figured out in 6 months. Marcus grabbed Daniel's arm. "Why are you here? Why are you mopping floors when you should be..." "Should be what?" Daniel's voice was sharp. "Flying, operating, doing any of the things my hands used to do before I couldn't feel my own fingers." He pulled free. "That man in the photo, he's dead. He died in a hospital in Kandahar. What's left is just this." He gestured at his uniform, his mop, his bucket. "This is what's left." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Does Victoria know?" "No, and she's not going to." "Daniel." "My daughter goes to school 3 blocks from here. I pick her up at 3:15. She waits in that corner until my shift ends because I can't afford aftercare and I don't have anyone else." Daniel's voice cracked. "If Victoria finds out who I am, she'll fire me just to prove she can. And then my daughter has nowhere to go. So that man in the photo, he stays dead. Understand?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good." Daniel picked up his mop. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have floors to clean." Victoria found him at noon. He was in the executive corridor cleaning a spill outside the conference room where the board was meeting. Through the glass walls, he could see Richard Kane gesturing emphatically. See the board members nodding along. See Victoria sitting at the head of the table with her mask firmly in place. Then she looked up, saw him through the glass. Their eyes met. She said something to the board, stood up, walked out. The door closed behind her. "You're still here." Her voice was flat. "You didn't fire me." "I should have." "Probably." They stood in silence. Daniel kept mopping. Victoria kept watching. "How did you know?" she finally asked. "About the valve. How did you know?" "I told you. Lucky guess." "Bullshit." She stepped closer. "I pulled your file. Previous employment classified. That's not a janitor's history. That's military. That's government." Daniel's mop stopped moving. "Who are you, Daniel Cross?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the fear behind the anger. The grief behind the ice. The little girl who lost her father and was trying so hard to become him that she'd forgotten how to be herself. "I'm nobody," he said quietly. "Just a man with a mop and a daughter who needs me to come home every night. That's all I am. That's all I want to be." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "I don't believe you." "You don't have to." "My father kept a photograph in his office. Him and a pilot taken during some military mission overseas. I never knew the story. He never told me." She paused. "The pilot in that photo had a scar on his arm, just like yours." Daniel's blood went cold. "A lot of people have scars." "Not like that one. Not in that exact place." Victoria's voice dropped. "My father wrote something on the back of that photograph. I found it after he died. It said, 'He saved my life. He wanted nothing in return. The best of us.'" Daniel said nothing. "Was that you?" Victoria's voice cracked. "Were you the pilot who saved my father?" The conference room door opened. Richard Kane stepped out, saw them talking, and smiled his thin smile. "Victoria, the board is waiting." She didn't move, didn't break eye contact with Daniel. "Was it you?" Daniel picked up his bucket. "Your board is waiting, Miss Lang." He walked away. Victoria watched him go, her hands trembling at her sides. "Victoria." Richard's voice was impatient. "Now." She turned and walked back into the conference room. But her mind stayed in that hallway, with a janitor who knew things he shouldn't know, who had scars that matched photographs, who looked at her with pity when everyone else looked at her with fear. Who was Daniel Cross? And what had he really done for her father? That night, Maya was drawing at the kitchen table when Daniel came home. "Daddy!" She ran to him, threw her arms around his waist. "You're late. I was worried." "Sorry, sweetheart. Long day." He kissed the top of her head. "You eat dinner?" "Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought soup. She said you looked tired yesterday, and I needed to make sure you ate too." Daniel smiled. Maria Rodriguez, 73 years old, widow, barely surviving on Social Security, but still found ways to take care of everyone else. "I'll thank her tomorrow." "Daddy." Maya looked up at him. "Are you going to lose your job?" "No, sweetheart. Everything's fine." "But that lady was so mean to you, and you didn't do anything wrong." Daniel crouched to her level. "You know what my mom used to tell me? She said that how people treat you says everything about them and nothing about you. That lady is going through something hard. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it." "Do you forgive her?" Daniel thought about Victoria's face when she asked about the photograph, the crack in her voice, the grief she was drowning in. "I think I do, sweetheart. I think I do." Maya hugged him again. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the stars in the sky." He put her to bed, read her a story about a girl who learned to fly, watched her eyes grow heavy and finally close. Then he sat in the dark living room and thought about Sterling Lang. He'd saved the man's life 15 years ago. A sandstorm in Nevada. Sterling's private jet went down during a demonstration flight. Daniel was nearby, part of a training exercise, saw the crash, pulled Sterling from the wreckage before the fuel tank exploded. Sterling wanted to give him money, recognition, a job. Daniel refused it all. He just wanted to go home, to Elena, to the life he thought would last forever. Now Sterling was dead. His daughter was running his company into the ground, and Daniel was mopping floors in the building Sterling had built. The universe had a sick sense of humor. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know who you are. We need to talk." Marcus Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Not here, not now, somewhere safe." The reply came instantly. "Tomorrow. 5 a.m. The old hangar, before anyone else arrives." Daniel put down the phone and looked out the window at the city lights. 2 days until the demonstration. 2 days until everything changed. He just didn't know how much. Daniel arrived at the old hangar at 4:47 a.m. The building hadn't been used in years. Dust covered everything. Old aircraft parts lay scattered across the floor like bones in a graveyard. The morning light was just beginning to creep through the cracked windows, casting long shadows across the concrete. Marcus was already there, sitting on an overturned crate, a thermos of coffee in his hands. "You're early," Daniel said. "So are you." Marcus gestured to another crate. "Sit down. We need to talk." Daniel remained standing. "About what?" "About why a decorated war hero is pushing a mop instead of running the engineering department." Marcus took a sip of coffee. "About why a man who saved 23 lives in Kandahar is letting a 34-year-old CEO treat him like garbage. About why you're hiding." "I'm not hiding. I'm surviving." "There's a difference." "Yeah." Daniel finally sat down. "Hiding means you're scared of being found. Surviving means you don't care anymore." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "I don't believe that. I saw your face yesterday when Victoria threw that mop at you. I saw something wake up. Something that's been sleeping for a long time. You saw a man trying not to lose his job. I saw a pilot." Marcus leaned forward. "I saw a surgeon. I saw Captain Daniel Cross of the 82nd Medical Battalion, recipient of the Silver Star, the man who flew into a sandstorm to save a civilian rescue team and then performed emergency surgery on 3 wounded soldiers while his own arms were bleeding out." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That man is dead." "The hell he is. That man walked into Victoria Lang's office yesterday and told her in front of 50 witnesses that her $400 million jet was going to explode. That's not a dead man. That's a man who still gives a damn." "I give a damn about my daughter. That's it." "Bullshit." Marcus stood up, his limp more pronounced in the cold morning air. "You give a damn about those pilots who are going to fly that jet. You give a damn about the engineers who'll get blamed when something goes wrong. You give a damn about this whole damn company, even though it doesn't deserve you." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "I want you to stop pretending." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed Daniel the photograph again. "I verified it last night. Cross-referenced military records, declassified mission reports, everything I could find. You're not just some janitor who got lucky. You're one of the most decorated combat surgeons in recent history. You flew missions that are still classified. You saved lives that the Pentagon doesn't even acknowledge." "And then I got blown up." Daniel's voice was flat. "And then my wife died. And then I spent 2 years learning how to hold a fork without dropping it. You want to know what I learned in those 2 years, Marcus? I learned that medals don't pay rent. I learned that heroism doesn't keep the lights on. I learned that the only thing that matters is being there for the people who need you." "Maya?" "Maya." Daniel's voice softened. "She's all I have left. And I'm not going to risk losing her because some CEO has daddy issues and some old engineer thinks I should be more than I am." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he sat back down. "Sterling Lang," he said. "You saved his life, didn't you? The sandstorm in Nevada. The crash." Daniel didn't answer. "I was there that day. Not at the crash site, but at the base. I heard the radio chatter. Heard the rescue team screaming that they couldn't get through the storm. And then someone whose call sign I never caught, flew straight into that wall of sand like it was nothing." Marcus's voice dropped. "They said it was impossible. They said no pilot could navigate those conditions. But you did. You pulled Sterling out of that wreckage and saved his life." "He would have done the same for me." "No, he wouldn't have. Sterling Lang was a good man, but he wasn't a pilot. He was a businessman who got lucky." Marcus leaned forward. "You were the luck, Daniel. You were the reason he got to go home to his daughter. The reason Victoria had a father for another 15 years. Daniel stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the runway where he used to watch jets take off. "Does she know?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Victoria, I don't think so, but she's looking. She pulled your file yesterday. She's asking questions." "Then I need to disappear, find another job, another city." "And Maya?" "You're going to uproot her again, take her away from her school, her friends, the only stability she's ever known. Daniel's hands curled into fists. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. Marcus walked over to stand beside him. You can stop running. You can tell Victoria the truth. You can... And then what? Daniel spun around. She thanks me, promotes me, gives me a corner office and a company car. He laughed bitterly. You don't know her, Marcus. You don't know what she's capable of. I know she's scared. I know she's drowning. I know she's trying so hard to be her father that she's forgotten how to be herself. That's not my problem. It became your problem the moment you walked into her office and told her that Jet was going to explode. Marcus put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You could have stayed quiet. You could have let it happen. But you didn't. Because somewhere inside that uniform, behind all that pain and grief and loss, there's still a man who can't stand by and watch people die. Daniel's eyes burned. He blinked hard. What do you want me to do? I want you to come to the demonstration on Friday. Not as a janitor. As yourself. As the man who saved Sterling Lang's life. No. Daniel. I said no. Daniel pulled away. I'll keep my head down. I'll finish my shift. I'll go home to my daughter. And when the demonstration is over and everyone's celebrating, I'll be invisible again. That's all I want. That's all I can handle. Marcus sighed. And if something goes wrong, if they missed something else? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll do what I always do. I'll clean up the mess. He walked out of the hangar without looking back. Victoria hadn't slept in 36 hours. She sat in her father's office, surrounded by files and photographs, her laptop open to a military database she'd bribed her way into. Her eyes were red. Her hands trembled from too much coffee and not enough food. Daniel Cross. The name haunted her. She'd found pieces of his story scattered across classified documents and redacted reports. A flight surgeon with the 82nd Medical Battalion. A pilot who flew missions that still didn't officially exist. A hero who disappeared after the Kandahar bombing and never resurfaced. Until now. Until he showed up at her company pushing a mop, raising a daughter, and saving her from a $400 million disaster like it was nothing. You're still here. Victoria looked up. Richard Kane stood in the doorway, his smile too sharp, his eyes too knowing. What do you want, Richard? I want to know why you're obsessing over a janitor instead of preparing for the biggest demonstration of your career. I'm not obsessing. You've been in this office for 2 days. You've pulled classified military records. You've made calls to Pentagon contacts that your father spent 20 years cultivating. Richard walked closer. All for a man who mops floors. Victoria closed her laptop. He's not just a janitor. No. Then what is he? She hesitated. I don't know yet. Well, while you're figuring that out, the board is getting restless. They're questioning your leadership. They're wondering if Sterling Lang's daughter is really ready to fill his shoes. Richard sat down across from her. They're talking about a vote of no confidence. Victoria's blood ran cold. They wouldn't dare. They would, and they will if you give them a reason. Richard leaned forward. The demonstration on Friday is everything. If it goes well, you're untouchable. If it fails, if anything goes wrong, they'll use it as an excuse to remove you. Nothing will go wrong. We fixed the valve. Did we? Richard's smile widened. Or did we just fix the problem a janitor found? What about the problems he didn't find? What about the systems he didn't check? Victoria's hands curled into fists. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you stop chasing ghosts and start focusing on what matters. Fire the janitor, quietly, before Friday. Make it look like a budget cut, a performance issue, whatever. Just get rid of him. Why? Because he makes you look weak. Richard stood up. He walked into your office and told you in front of your entire engineering team that you'd missed something critical. That's not something people forget. That's not something the board forgets. He saved the company. He embarrassed you. And in this business, embarrassment is fatal. Richard walked to the door. Fire him, Victoria. before he becomes a bigger problem." He left. Victoria sat alone in the silence, staring at the photograph on her desk. Her father, the pilot, the scar. She thought about what Richard said. Fire him. Make him disappear. Protect yourself. Then she thought about Daniel's eyes, the way he looked at her. Not with fear, not with anger. With something that looked almost like understanding. Like he knew exactly what she was going through. Like he'd been there himself. She picked up the phone, dialed a number. "I need a favor," she said. "I need you to find everything you can about a man named Daniel Cross. Military records, medical records, everything that's been classified." She paused. "And I need it by tomorrow." Daniel picked up Maya from school at 3:15. She was waiting at the gate, her notebook clutched against her chest, her face worried. She'd been worried a lot lately. He hated that. "Hey, sweetheart." "Daddy?" She ran to him, threw her arms around his waist. "Mrs. Patterson said you called the school today. She said you asked about transferring me." Daniel's heart sank. He'd hoped to have this conversation later, at home, when he had time to prepare. "I was just asking questions, Maya. Nothing's decided." "But why?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Why do we have to move again? I like it here. I have friends here. I don't want to start over." Daniel crouched down to her level. "I know, sweetheart, I know. But sometimes things change. Sometimes we have to go somewhere new." "Because of that lady? The mean one." "It's complicated." "That's what you always say when you don't want to tell me the truth." Daniel smiled despite himself. She was too smart, just like her mother. "You're right. I'm sorry." He took her hands. "The truth is, Daddy made some people at work angry. And when you make powerful people angry, sometimes they try to hurt you. But you didn't do anything wrong. You helped them." "I know." "Then why are they angry?" "Because sometimes people don't like being helped. Sometimes they'd rather fail on their own than succeed with someone else's help." Maya was quiet for a moment. "That's stupid." Daniel laughed. It surprised him. He hadn't laughed in weeks. "Yeah, sweetheart, it is." They walked home hand in hand. Maya told him about her day, about the math test she aced, about the boy who pulled her hair, about the teacher who said her jet engine drawings were remarkably detailed for a 9-year-old. Daniel listened, smiled, nodded in all the right places. But his mind was elsewhere. On Victoria, on Marcus, on the demonstration in 2 days, on the feeling that something was coming, something big, something he couldn't stop. That night, after Maya was asleep, Daniel sat in the living room and stared at his hands. The scars were faded now, barely visible in the dim light, but he could still feel them, could still feel the shrapnel tearing through his flesh, could still feel the moment when everything changed. He'd been a different man before Kandahar, confident, capable, certain of his place in the world. Now he was none of those things. Now he was just a father trying to survive, a janitor trying to stay invisible, a ghost trying not to haunt the places where he used to belong. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Victoria is digging. She found your service record. It's only a matter of time." Daniel stared at the message. Then he typed back, "Let her dig. She won't find anything that changes who I am now. Who are you now?" Daniel thought about the question for a long time. "I'm Maya's father." "That's enough." "Is it?" He didn't answer. The next morning, one day before the demonstration, Daniel arrived at work to find Victoria waiting for him. She was standing outside the main entrance, arms crossed, no entourage, no executives, no Richard Kane whispering in her ear. Just her. "We need to talk," she said. "I have floors to clean." "They can wait." Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away, to keep his head down, to stay invisible. But something in her voice stopped him. Something that sounded almost like desperation. 5 minutes, he said. She led him to a small conference room on the second floor, closed the door, stood by the window with her back to him. I found your file, she said. Your real file. The one the Pentagon doesn't want anyone to see. Daniel said nothing. 82nd Medical Battalion. Flight surgeon. Combat pilot. Silver Star for valor. Her voice trembled. 23 confirmed saves. Missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, classified operations in places that don't officially exist. That was a long time ago. You were there when the hospital was bombed. You shielded 3 soldiers with your own body. You kept operating on the wounded even after shrapnel destroyed your hands. She turned to face him. Her eyes were wet. You're a hero, Daniel, an actual hero. And you're mopping floors in my father's company. Your company now. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to remind you that the past doesn't matter, only the present. Victoria laughed bitterly. Easy to say when your past is full of medals and glory. My past is full of dead friends and a wife I couldn't save. Daniel's voice hardened. My past is full of nights when I can't sleep because I hear the screaming. My past is full of looking at my daughter and wondering if I'm enough, if I'll ever be enough. The room went silent. Victoria stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Nevada, she said softly. The sandstorm. That was you, wasn't it? Daniel didn't answer. My father's jet went down during a demonstration. Everyone said it was impossible to reach him. The storm was too strong, the visibility too low. But someone flew through anyway. Someone pulled him from the wreckage. Someone saved his life. Her voice cracked. That someone was you. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Victoria walked toward him. He talked about you, you know. Not often. Not to many people. But sometimes late at night he'd tell me about the pilot who refused a medal. The pilot who just wanted to go home. I had someone waiting for me. Elena. Daniel's chest tightened. You found that too. I found everything. Victoria stopped a foot away from him. I found the marriage certificate, the birth certificate for Maya, the death certificate for your wife. Her voice dropped. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry for what you've lost. Don't. Don't what? Don't feel sorry for me. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, it's... She struggled to find the word. It's recognition. It's seeing someone for who they really are, not who they pretend to be. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw past the CEO, past the ice, past the armor she wore like a second skin. He saw a daughter who lost her father. A woman drowning in grief. A human being who was just as broken as he was. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I owe you an apology. Victoria's voice shook. For the mop. For the things I said. For treating you like you were nothing when you're everything. I'm not everything. I'm just a man trying to raise his daughter. You're the man who saved my father. The man who gave me 15 more years with him. Tears ran down her face. Do you know what that means to me? Do you have any idea? Daniel thought about Maya, about the 15 years he'd have with her if he was lucky, about all the moments, the drawings, the questions, the hugs that made everything else bearable. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I do. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Victoria did something that surprised them both. She hugged him. It was awkward, uncertain, the embrace of two people who'd forgotten how to be vulnerable. But it was real. I'm sorry, she whispered into his shoulder. I'm so sorry. Daniel hesitated. Then slowly he put his arms around her. I know, he said. Me too. They stayed like that for a long moment. Two broken people holding each other up. Then the door burst open. Richard Kane stood in the doorway, his face twisted with something between shock and triumph. Well, he said, his voice dripping with false surprise. "Isn't this cozy?" Victoria pulled away, wiping her eyes. "Richard, this isn't what the CEO of Vanguard Industries embracing a janitor." Richard smiled. "I'm sure the board will find that very interesting. Get out." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Richard stepped into the room. "You see, I've just come from a very productive meeting with Senator Morrison's office. It seems they have concerns about tomorrow's demonstration, concerns about leadership, concerns about judgment." Victoria's face went pale. "What did you do?" "I did what you couldn't. I protected this company." Richard's eyes flicked to Daniel. "And I found out some very interesting things about your janitor friend, things that I'm sure the press would love to know." Daniel stepped forward. "Leave her out of this." "Oh, I'm afraid it's too late for that." Richard pulled out his phone. "One call, that's all it takes. One call and every news outlet in the country knows that Vanguard's CEO has been conspiring with a washed-up veteran, that she ignored her engineers and took advice from a man who mops toilets." His smile widened. "How do you think that will play, Victoria? How do you think the board will react?" Victoria's hands shook. "You wouldn't." "Try me." The room went silent. Daniel looked at Richard Kane. At his expensive suit, his perfect hair, his absolute certainty that he'd won. Then he looked at Victoria, at the fear in her eyes, the desperation. He thought about walking away, about picking up his mop and disappearing into the shadows where he belonged. But then he thought about Maya, about the drawing she'd made him, about the words she'd said, "You'll fly again someday, Daddy." And something inside him shifted. "You want a story?" Daniel's voice was calm, too calm. "I'll give you a story." He rolled up his sleeve. The scar gleamed in the fluorescent light, and beside it, the tattoo, the wings, the caduceus, the words that had defined his life. "First, do no harm." Richard's smile faltered. "What is that?" "That's the 82nd Medical Battalion, the unit that saved 23 lives in Kandahar while our hands were bleeding out, the unit that flew missions your security clearance couldn't even dream of." He stepped closer. "You want to call the press? Go ahead. Tell them about the janitor. Tell them about the washed-up veteran." Daniel's voice dropped. "And then tell them about the Silver Star recipient, the combat surgeon, the pilot who saved Sterling Lang's life in a sandstorm that killed 6 other aircraft." Richard's face went white. "Tell them all of it, Richard, and see how that story plays." The silence stretched. Then Richard's phone slipped from his fingers. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Daniel pulled out his own phone. Showed Richard a photograph, the same one Marcus had found. The military gala. The medals. The faces that proved everything. "One call," Daniel said. "That's all it takes. One call and every news outlet in the country knows that Vanguard CFO tried to blackmail a decorated war hero, a man who saved the founder's life, a man who's been quietly protecting this company while people like you tried to destroy it." He leaned closer. "How do you think that will play, Richard? How do you think the board will react?" Richard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Victoria stared at Daniel like she'd never seen him before. "Get out," she said to Richard. Her voice was steady now, strong. "Get out of this building. Get out of this company. And if I ever see your face again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." Richard stumbled backward. His face was gray. His hands shook. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Yes," Daniel said. "It is." Richard fled. The door closed behind him. And in the silence that followed, Victoria turned to Daniel with tears streaming down her face. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you help me? After everything I did to you?" Daniel looked at her, at the woman who'd thrown his mop, who'd called him nothing, who'd made his daughter cry, and he saw someone else entirely. "Because you're worth saving," he said. "You just forgot." He walked out of the room, left her standing alone. One day until the demonstration. One day until everything changed. Daniel didn't go home that night. He sat in the old hangar until midnight staring at the photograph on his phone. The military gala, the medals, the man he used to be. He'd spent 5 years trying to bury that man. 5 years pretending he was nobody. 5 years convincing himself that the past didn't matter, that medals were just metal, that heroism was just a word people used when they didn't understand sacrifice. And in 30 seconds, he'd thrown it all away. For a woman who'd humiliated him. For a company that didn't deserve him. For a truth he'd sworn to keep buried forever. His phone buzzed. "Marcus. You okay?" Daniel laughed. It sounded hollow even to him. "I just threatened the CFO of a billion-dollar company with career destruction. I revealed classified military information to prevent a blackmail scheme. And I have no idea if I still have a job tomorrow." He paused. "Yeah, Marcus, I'm great." "Richard's gone. Victoria fired him officially about an hour ago. Security escorted him out. He was screaming about lawsuits and conspiracies. He'll be back. Maybe. But not before the demonstration." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "She's looking for you, you know. Victoria. She's been asking everyone where you went. Tell her I went home." "Did you—" Daniel looked around the empty hangar, the dust, the shadows, the ghosts of aircraft that used to fill this space. "No. Daniel, whatever happened in that room?" "Nothing happened. I reminded her who I am, who I was." Daniel's voice cracked. "I spent 5 years trying to forget Marcus. 5 years building a wall between that man and this one. And now the wall is down. Now I don't know who I am anymore." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "You're still Maya's father. That hasn't changed." "No, but everything else has." Daniel hung up, stared at the phone. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He called his wife. Not literally, of course. Elena was gone. Had been gone for 5 years. But he kept her voicemail active. Paid the phone bill every month just to hear her voice. "Hi, you've reached Elena Cross. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back. And if this is Daniel, I love you. Come home safe." The beep sounded. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Hey, baby. It's me." His voice shook. "I know it's been a while. I know I should talk to you more. But I didn't know what to say." He paused, wiped his eyes. "Something happened today, something I can't take back. I showed them who I was, who I really was. And now everyone knows. The CEO, the engineers, probably the whole company by tomorrow." He laughed bitterly. "You always said I was terrible at hiding. You said my face gave everything away. Guess you were right." He looked at the photograph again. The young man in the dress uniform, the medals, the certainty in those eyes. "I miss that guy, Elena. I miss knowing who I was. I miss being sure of anything." His voice dropped. "But mostly I just miss you. I miss your laugh, your smell. The way you'd hold my hands when they were shaking and tell me everything would be okay." He closed his eyes. "I'm trying to be okay. For Maya. For us. But sometimes I forget what okay feels like." The voicemail beeped. Time limit reached. Daniel set down the phone, sat in the darkness, and waited for morning. The demonstration day arrived under a sky that couldn't decide between rain and sun. Daniel had slept maybe 2 hours. His uniform was wrinkled. His eyes were red. But he showed up anyway, picked up his mop, started working. Because that's what he did. That's who he was now. Not a hero, not a pilot, just a man who cleaned floors and kept his head down. Except today, people looked at him differently. The engineers who used to ignore him nodded as he passed. The security guards who used to look through him met his eyes. Someone had talked. Richard probably before he was escorted out. Or maybe Marcus. Or maybe Victoria herself. The secret was out. Everyone knew. Daniel kept mopping, kept his head down, tried to be invisible. But you can't be invisible when everyone's looking for you. Mr. Cross. He turned. A young engineer, Kevin Park, the one who'd talked to Maya about thrust-to-weight ratios, stood behind him, tablet in hand. Miss Lang wants to see you. Main hangar. She said it's urgent. Tell her I'm busy. She said you'd say that. Kevin smiled nervously. She also said to tell you that if you don't come, she'll find you herself. And she'll bring the press. Daniel sighed, set down the mop. Lead the way. The main hangar was transformed. Pentagon representatives in dress uniforms, defense contractors in expensive suits, journalists with cameras and microphones. Senator Morrison in the center of it all, shaking hands and making promises. And at the heart of everything, the Apex prototype. $400 million of aerospace engineering gleaming under the industrial lights. The most advanced fighter jet ever built. The future of American air superiority. Victoria stood beside it, delivering a speech to the assembled crowd. She wore a navy blue suit instead of her usual black. Her hair was pulled back. Her voice was steady and strong. And with this demonstration, Vanguard Industries proves once again that we are the leaders in aerospace innovation. The Apex prototype represents not just technological advancement, but American excellence. The same excellence my father built this company on 30 years ago. Applause rippled through the crowd. Daniel hung back near the entrance, watching from the shadows. Kevin had disappeared. The mop was gone. He was just another face in the crowd now. Except Victoria's eyes found him anyway. She paused mid-sentence, just for a moment. Their eyes met across the hangar. Then she looked away and continued her speech. Today, we show the world what Vanguard is capable of. Today, we honor my father's legacy. Today, we fly. More applause. The crowd shifted. Engineers began final preparations. Daniel turned to leave. A hand caught his arm. Don't. Victoria stood beside him. She'd crossed the entire hangar while he wasn't looking. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The fear she was trying to hide. Don't leave, she said. Please. You don't need me here. Yes, I do. Her voice cracked. I need you to watch. I need you to make sure nothing goes wrong. Your engineers fixed the valve. The jet is fine. I know, but I'm not. She gripped his arm tighter. I've been running on adrenaline and coffee for 3 days. I fired my CFO. I discovered that the man mopping my floors is the same man who saved my father's life. I have the Pentagon and the press watching my every move. And if anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. You don't know that. No. Daniel met her eyes. But I know you. You're stronger than you think. Your father knew it. That's why he left you the company. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. He left me the company because I was all he had. He left you the company because you were all he needed. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she let go of his arm. Stay, please, just until it's over. Daniel looked at the jet, at the engineers, at the crowd of powerful people waiting to see something amazing. He thought about Maya, about Elena, about all the reasons he had to stay invisible. Then he thought about Victoria, about the fear in her eyes, about the way she'd hugged him yesterday like she was drowning. Okay, he said. I'll stay. The test began at 2:47 p.m. The Apex prototype was mounted on a test rig at the far end of the hangar, its engines primed, its systems humming. Engineers crowded around monitors, checking readings, making last-minute adjustments. Victoria stood at the control station flanked by Senator Morrison and the lead Pentagon representative. Cameras flashed. Journalists took notes. Daniel found a spot near the back wall where he could see everything but remain unseen. Old habits, the instincts of a man who'd spent years operating in shadows. "Initiate test sequence," Victoria said. The engines roared to life. The sound was deafening. Beautiful. A symphony of controlled explosion and precision engineering. The kind of sound that reminded Daniel why he'd loved flying in the first place. For 90 seconds, everything was perfect. Pressure readings held steady. Fuel burn was optimal. Thrust output exceeded projections. The engineers exchanged relieved glances. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. Then the alarm sounded. A single red light flashed on the control panel. Then another. Then another. "What's happening?" Victoria's voice cut through the noise. "Pressure spike in the secondary fuel line," an engineer shouted. "We're getting feedback." "From where?" "I don't know. The readings don't make sense." Daniel pushed through the crowd. His eyes scanned the monitors, the schematics, the flashing warnings. His mind raced through possibilities. Fuel contamination, sensor malfunction, structural failure. Then he saw it. The auxiliary pump. His voice was calm. Too calm. Someone bypassed the safety interlock. Victoria spun around. "What?" "The auxiliary fuel pump. It's running at maximum pressure instead of standby. That's what's causing the feedback." Daniel pointed at the schematic. "If you don't shut it down in the next 30 seconds, the whole system overloads." "Who would?" Victoria's face went pale. "Richard. He must have done something before security escorted him out, a parting gift." The alarms multiplied. Smoke began pouring from the engine housing. "Shut it down!" Victoria screamed. "Shut everything down!" "We can't! The override's been locked out!" Daniel was already moving. He ran toward the test rig, shoving past engineers ducking under equipment. Behind him, he heard Victoria shouting his name. Heard the chaos erupting as people realized what was happening. The heat hit him first. Waves of it rolling off the overheating engines like a physical force. Then the smoke, thick and black, burning his eyes and throat. He reached the auxiliary pump housing. Grabbed the manual release valve. It was jammed. Richard had welded it shut. "Come on!" Daniel pulled harder. The metal bit into his palms. Blood welled up. "Come on!" The valve wouldn't budge. Behind him, a fuel line ruptured. Fire exploded across the test platform. Daniel didn't think. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, sprayed a path through the flames, and kept working on the valve. "Daniel!" Marcus was there, suddenly, a wrench in his hand. "Move!" Together they attacked the welded valve. The heat was unbearable. The smoke was blinding. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. "It's giving!" Marcus shouted. "One more!" The valve broke free. Daniel spun the release. The auxiliary pump shuddered, coughed, and died. The pressure readings dropped. The alarms fell silent one by one. For a moment, there was nothing but smoke and ringing ears and the sound of fire suppression foam raining down from above. Then Daniel heard the scream. Maya. His blood turned to ice. He'd told her to stay home today. Had called Mrs. Rodriguez to watch her. Had made her promise not to come to the hangar. But there she was, standing at the edge of the test platform, frozen in terror, her notebook clutched against her chest. She must have snuck away from Mrs. Rodriguez. Must have taken the bus to the facility. Must have wanted to see her father at work. And now she was trapped. The secondary explosion came without warning. A ruptured fuel cell ignited, sending a wall of fire cascading across the floor. The flames cut between Daniel and Maya, separating them by 20 feet of burning concrete. "Daddy!" Her scream tore through the chaos. Daniel didn't hesitate. He ran into the fire. The heat was a living thing pressing against his skin, trying to push him back. His uniform caught. He beat out the flames without slowing down. His vision blurred. His lungs screamed. Every cell in his body begged him to stop. He didn't stop. He reached Maya in seconds that felt like hours. Scooped her into his arms. Wrapped his body around hers like a shield. "Close your eyes, sweetheart. Don't look." "Daddy, I'm scared." "I know, baby, I know, but I've got you. I've always got you." He turned toward the exit. The fire was everywhere now, consuming everything. He couldn't see a path, couldn't see anything but flames and smoke and death. Then he heard Victoria's voice. "Daniel, this way, follow my voice." He ran toward the sound, blind, trusting. The way he used to fly through sandstorms following instruments he couldn't see, believing in navigation systems he couldn't understand. The flames parted. Victoria was there, a fire extinguisher in her hands, spraying a path through the inferno. Behind her, Marcus and a team of firefighters were pulling back the blaze. "Come on!" Victoria screamed. "Move!" Daniel ran. 10 feet. 5, 3. He burst through the flames and collapsed on the concrete floor, Maya still clutched in his arms. Firefighters swarmed them, spraying foam, checking for injuries. "She's okay." Daniel's voice was raw. "She's okay. Just scared. Let me see." A paramedic pulled Maya gently from his arms. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. Let me take a look at you." Maya reached for Daniel. "Daddy, don't leave me." "I'm right here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." He tried to stand. His legs buckled. That's when he realized his arm was burned. The sleeve of his uniform had melted away, revealing the skin beneath red, blistered, but still intact. And beside the burns, clearly visible for the first time since he'd hidden it away, was the tattoo. The wings. The caduceus. The words. "First, do no harm." Victoria saw it first. She was standing over him, her face streaked with soot and tears, her hand still gripping the empty fire extinguisher. Her eyes locked onto the tattoo, and she froze. "Oh my God," she whispered. Then the journalists saw it. Cameras flashed, voices erupted. Someone was already on their phone shouting about exclusive footage. "That's the 82nd Medical Battalion insignia," a reporter said into her microphone. "I'm being told this is the same unit that was involved in the classified Kandahar operation." "Is that?" Another reporter pushed forward. "Sir, are you Captain Daniel Cross, the pilot who was declared MIA in 2010? Daniel closed his eyes. The secret was out. All of it. "Everyone back?" Victoria's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "This man just saved my life and the life of his daughter. You will give him space, or I will have every single one of you escorted off this property." The journalists hesitated. "Now." They backed away. Victoria knelt beside Daniel. Her hand found the burned one, and held it gently. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. All of it. Richard, the sabotage. Everything. It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. I hired him. I trusted him. I let him—" "Stop." Daniel's voice was weak but firm. "You didn't do this. He did. And he's going to pay for it." "Daddy?" Maya's voice, small and scared. "Daddy, are you hurt?" Daniel turned his head. Maya was beside him now, the paramedic having given up on keeping her away. Her face was dirty, her notebook was gone, but she was alive. She was alive. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a little toasted." "You saved me." "That's my job." "No." Maya shook her head. Tears streamed down her face. "That's not your job. Your job is mopping floors. You saved me because you're a hero." Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm not a hero, Maya." "Yes, you are." She took his hand, the one that wasn't burned, and held it tight. "You're my hero. You've always been my hero." The tears came then. The ones he'd been holding back for 5 years. The ones he'd buried with Elena, with his career, with the man he used to be. He pulled Maya close and let himself cry. The paramedics loaded Daniel onto a stretcher 20 minutes later. The burns were 2nd degree. Painful, but not critical. He'd need treatment, maybe a skin graft, definitely weeks of recovery. But he'd live. Maya refused to leave his side. Victoria had tried to arrange for someone to take her home, but the girl had grabbed Daniel's hand and wouldn't let go. "I'm staying with my daddy." Nobody argued. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Victoria walked alongside. The demonstration is ruined, she said quietly. The jet is destroyed. The Pentagon is furious. The board is calling for my resignation. What are you going to do? I don't know. She laughed bitterly. For the first time in my life, I genuinely don't know. Yes, you do. She looked at him. You're going to tell them the truth, Daniel said. About Richard, about the sabotage, about everything. And then you're going to rebuild. With what my reputation is destroyed. My company is in flames, literally. Your company is still standing. Your people are still standing. Daniel met her eyes. I've seen buildings collapse. I've seen careers end. I've seen men lose everything and find the strength to start again. You can do the same. How do you know? Because you're Sterling Lang's daughter, and Sterling Lang never quit on anything in his life. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to be him. Then don't be him. Be better. The paramedics stopped at the ambulance, started preparing to load Daniel in. Victoria gripped his hand one last time. I'm going to make this right, she said. I promise. Everything you've lost, everything you've sacrificed, I'm going to make it right. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. Her voice cracked. My father's life, my company, my own life, twice now. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Rest. Heal. Let me handle the rest. She stepped back. The paramedics loaded Daniel into the ambulance. Maya climbed in beside him, still holding his hand, still refusing to let go. Daddy. Yes, sweetheart. That lady isn't so mean anymore. Daniel laughed. It hurt his burned skin, but he laughed anyway. No, sweetheart. I don't think she is. The ambulance doors closed, and as they drove away from the burning hangar, Daniel looked at his daughter, covered in soot, exhausted but alive, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The hospital room was quiet. Daniel had been there for 6 hours. The doctors had treated his burns, bandaged his hands, pumped him full of painkillers. Maya was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting on his arm. He should have been sleeping too. The drugs were making everything fuzzy. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames, heard Maya's scream, felt the heat pressing against his skin. Some memories didn't let you rest. A knock on the door. Victoria stepped in, still wearing her soot-stained suit. She looked like she hadn't slept either. I thought you'd still be at the hangar, Daniel said. The fire department has it contained. The investigators are doing their thing. The board can wait until morning. She pulled a chair beside his bed. How are you feeling? Like I ran into a burning building. Technically, you did. Technically, I saved your jet, or what's left of it. Victoria smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. Not the corporate mask, not the ice. Something genuine. The preliminary investigation found Richard's sabotage, she said. He'd been planning it for weeks. Apparently, he thought if the demonstration failed, the board would remove me and put him in charge. Did they know the board? Some of them. Victoria's smile faded. Senator Morrison is launching a full investigation. Several board members have already resigned. By tomorrow, half the company leadership will be gone. Including you. That depends. On what? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. On whether I can convince them that Vanguard is worth saving. That I'm worth saving. And how are you going to do that? She pulled out her phone, showed him a video. It was the footage from the hangar. The explosion. The fire. Daniel running into the flames. Daniel carrying Maya through the inferno. Daniel collapsing with his daughter in his arms. And at the end, a close-up of his tattoo. This video has been viewed 40 million times in the last 6 hours, Victoria said. Every major news network is running it. The headline is the same everywhere. Hero janitor saves daughter in aerospace explosion. Daniel stared at the screen. They're calling you a hero, Daniel. The whole country. The same people who would have walked past you without a second glance yesterday are now calling you the bravest man in America. I'm not brave. You just ran into a fire to save your daughter. You just exposed a saboteur. You just prevented a catastrophe that could have killed dozens of people. Victoria put the phone away. That's not nothing. That's everything. Daniel looked at Maya still sleeping beside him. I just wanted to keep her safe. I know. That's what makes it heroic. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. It was the one from her father's office. Sterling Lang shaking hands with a pilot in military fatigues. The same photograph Daniel had been avoiding for 15 years. I found this after the funeral, Victoria said. I never knew the story behind it. My father never told me. He didn't like talking about that day. Will you tell me? Daniel looked at the photograph, at his younger self, at the man he used to be, and for the first time in 5 years, he told the truth. It was 2010. A sandstorm in Nevada. Your father was there for a demonstration similar to today, actually. His jet went down during a test flight. Pilot error, mechanical failure, nobody knows for sure. He paused. I was nearby, part of a training exercise. When the distress call came through, everyone said it was impossible. The storm was too strong. Visibility was 0. Any rescue attempt would be suicide. But you went anyway. Yeah, I went anyway. Why? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Because I heard his voice on the radio. Heard him say he had a daughter waiting for him at home. A little girl who needed her father. His voice cracked. And I thought about my own daughter. The one I'd never met. The one who was growing inside Elena while I was flying missions halfway around the world. He looked at Victoria. I couldn't let another father not come home. Victoria's tears fell silently. You saved him for me. I saved him for both of us. She reached out, took his hand. Thank you, she whispered. For everything, for my father, for the company, for today, for... She couldn't finish. You're welcome. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other up. Then Maya stirred, opened her eyes. Daddy, is the mean lady here again? Victoria laughed through her tears. Yes, sweetheart. The mean lady is here. But I'm trying not to be mean anymore. Maya considered this seriously. Okay, she said finally. But you have to promise. I promise. Pinky promise. Victoria extended her pinky. Maya wrapped her small finger around it. There, Maya said, satisfied. Now you can't break it. Daniel watched them, his daughter and the woman who'd humiliated him, connected by a pinky promise in a hospital room at midnight. And despite everything, the burns, the fear, the uncertainty, he smiled. Maybe hope wasn't such a foreign feeling after all. The morning after the fire, Daniel woke to find his hospital room filled with flowers. Roses, lilies, sunflowers, arrangements from people he'd never met, cards from strangers across the country. The nurses had stopped trying to find space for them hours ago. You're famous, Daddy. Maya sat cross-legged on his bed, flipping through a stack of cards. Her face was clean now, her hair brushed her notebook, replaced by a new one, a gift from Victoria delivered sometime during the night. I don't want to be famous. Too late. Maya held up her phone, another gift from Victoria. You have a hashtag. Daniel groaned. A what? A hashtag. It's like when everyone talks about the same thing online. She showed him the screen. Hero Janitor is trending. That means millions of people are talking about you. Wonderful. There's also #SingleDadHero and #tattoo_reveal and... Maya squinted at the screen. What does zaddy mean? Daniel grabbed the phone. You don't need to know that. A knock on the door saved him from further explanation. Marcus stepped in carrying coffee and looking like he hadn't slept in days. You're awake. Good. He handed Daniel a cup. You're going to need this. Why? Because there's a line of reporters outside the hospital. Because the Pentagon has requested a formal interview. Because Senator Morrison wants to give you a medal. Marcus sat down heavily. And because Victoria Lang is about to hold a press conference that's going to change everything. Daniel set down the coffee. What kind of press conference? The kind where she tells the truth. All of it. Richard's sabotage. Your identity. The connection to her father. Marcus met his eyes. She's going to tell the world who you really are, Daniel. And she's going to do it with or without your permission. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. I didn't ask for this. I know, but it's happening anyway. Marcus leaned forward. The question is, are you going to hide in this hospital room and let other people tell your story? Or are you going to stand up and tell it yourself? Daniel looked at Maya. She was watching him with those serious eyes, her mother's eyes. What do you think, sweetheart? Maya considered the question carefully, the way she always did. I think Mom would want you to stop hiding. The words hit him like a punch. She always said you were too good at disappearing, Maya continued. She said you'd rather be invisible than admit you were special. She took his hand. But you are special, Daddy, and I think it's okay for other people to know that too. Daniel's throat tightened. 5 years. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of convincing himself that the past didn't matter, that medals were just metal, that the man he used to be was dead and buried. And his 9-year-old daughter had just demolished all of it with a single sentence. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Marcus stood up. I'll tell Victoria you're ready. Ready for what? For whatever comes next. Victoria's press conference was scheduled for noon. Daniel watched it from his hospital bed. Maya curled up beside him, Marcus standing in the corner with his arms crossed. The conference room at Vanguard was packed. Journalists filled every seat. Cameras lined the walls. The Vanguard logo hung behind the podium slightly crooked. No one had bothered to straighten it after the chaos of the previous day. Victoria stepped up to the microphone. She looked different. Not the ice queen who'd thrown a mop at Daniel 3 days ago. Not the corporate mask he'd seen her wear in board meetings. Something had shifted. Something real. Thank you for coming, she said. Her voice was steady, but softer than usual. I know you have questions. I'm going to try to answer them. But first I need to tell you a story. She paused, took a breath. 3 days ago, a man I'd never met walked into my hangar and told me that my $400 million prototype was going to explode. I didn't believe him. I insulted him. I had security escort him out. Her voice cracked. That man was Daniel Cross, and he was right. The journalists erupted with questions. Victoria raised her hand. Please, let me finish. Silence. Daniel Cross is not just a janitor. He's a decorated combat veteran, a former flight surgeon, a pilot who flew missions that are still classified. 15 years ago, he saved my father's life in a sandstorm in Nevada. He asked for nothing in return. He disappeared into obscurity and never looked back. She gripped the podium. Yesterday, that same man ran into a burning hangar to save his daughter. He exposed a sabotage plot that could have killed dozens of people, and he did it all while this company treated him like he was invisible. Victoria looked directly into the camera. Daniel felt like she was looking directly at him. I was wrong. About him. About everything. Her voice dropped. My father built this company on a simple principle that people matter more than profits. That integrity matters more than image. That doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when no one's watching, is what separates leaders from followers. She straightened. I forgot that. In my desperation to prove I was strong enough to fill my father's shoes, I forgot what those shoes were actually made of. I became someone he wouldn't recognize. Someone I don't want to be. A tear ran down her face. She didn't wipe it away. That changes today. Richard Kane, our former CFO, has been arrested for industrial sabotage and attempted corporate espionage. Several board members who were complicit in his schemes have resigned, and effective immediately, Vanguard Industries is launching a full internal investigation into our workplace culture. The journalists stirred, more questions forming. But that's not enough. Victoria's voice strengthened. Daniel Cross showed me what real leadership looks like, not through speeches or press conferences, but through action, through sacrifice, through the willingness to do what's right, even when the cost is everything. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph. Daniel's breath caught. It was the photograph from her father's office. Sterling Lang shaking hands with a young pilot in military fatigues. "This is my father with the man who saved his life," Victoria said, holding up the image. "For 15 years, I didn't know who this pilot was. My father never told me. He just kept this photograph in his desk and looked at it whenever he needed to remember what courage looked like." She set the photograph down. "Now I know. And now you know too." She looked into the camera again. Daniel Cross is a hero, not because of his medals or his missions or anything he did in the past. He's a hero because when it mattered, when his daughter was in danger, when lives were on the line, he didn't hesitate. He ran into the fire. Her voice broke. "That's the kind of man my father believed in. That's the kind of man I want to believe in too." She stepped back from the podium. "I'll take your questions now." The room exploded. Daniel turned off the television. Maya was looking at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, she said you're a hero." "I heard." "She said you saved her daddy." "I know." "Did you really fly through a sandstorm?" Daniel closed his eyes. The memories were there waiting. The wall of sand, the screaming wind, the voice on the radio, Sterling Lang calm, despite his terror, saying he had a daughter at home who needed him. "Yeah, sweetheart, I really did." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" He opened his eyes, looked at his daughter, the only good thing he'd managed to create in a life full of destruction. "Because I didn't want you to know the man I used to be. I wanted you to know the man I am now." "But Daddy," Maya's voice was small, "they're the same person." The words hung in the air. Daniel had spent 5 years trying to separate himself from his past, trying to convince himself that Captain Daniel Cross, the pilot, the surgeon, the hero, was a different person entirely. Someone who died in a hospital bombing and never came back. But Maya was right. They were the same person. They'd always been the same person. The door opened. Victoria stepped in, still wearing the same suit from the press conference. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I wanted to see you before the chaos started." "What chaos?" "The Pentagon called. They're fast-tracking your official recognition. The medals you refused 15 years ago. They want to give them to you again, publicly this time." She sat down in the chair beside his bed. "The president wants to meet you." Daniel stared at her. "The president?" "Of the United States, yes." Victoria almost smiled. "Apparently saving a billionaire's life and exposing corporate sabotage qualifies you for a White House visit." "I don't want to meet the president." "I know, but you might not have a choice." Victoria's smile faded. "The story is everywhere, Daniel. Every network, every newspaper, every social media platform. You can't put this back in the box." Daniel looked at the flowers filling his room, at the cards from strangers, at his daughter watching him with those serious eyes. "What do you want?" he asked Victoria. "What do you mean? You didn't come here to tell me about the Pentagon. You came here for something else. What is it?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I want to offer you a job." Daniel almost laughed. "A job doing what? Mopping floors in a bigger hangar?" "No." Victoria opened the folder. Inside were architectural drawings, budget projections, mission statements. I want to build something my father would have been proud of, something that honors what you did, what you sacrificed. She spread the documents across his bed. A training center. For veterans who want to work in aerospace but can't afford the traditional pathways. For kids from underprivileged backgrounds who dream of flying but don't have access to flight schools. For anyone who's been told they're not good enough, not smart enough, not connected enough to touch the sky. Daniel stared at the drawings. I want you to run it, Victoria said. Not as a janitor, not as a figurehead, as a leader. Someone who can teach the next generation what real courage looks like. I'm not a teacher. You're wrong. Victoria's voice softened. You taught me more in 3 days than anyone has in my entire life. About strength. About sacrifice. About what it really means to lead. She pointed to a drawing of a building. This will be called the Sterling Cross Center. Named for my father and for you. A place where people like you, people who've been overlooked and underestimated and forgotten, can find their wings again. Daniel's hands trembled as he picked up the documents. Why? He asked. Why would you do this for me? Because you did it for my father. Because you did it for me. Victoria met his eyes. And because I spent 34 years believing that strength meant never needing anyone. You showed me how wrong I was. She stood up. You don't have to decide now. Take your time. Heal. Be with your daughter. She walked to the door, then paused. But Daniel, whatever you decide, know this, you changed my life. And I'm going to spend the rest of mine trying to be worthy of that. She left. Daniel sat in the silence, staring at the drawings. Maya crawled closer to him. Daddy, are you going to say yes? He looked at his daughter. At the hope in her eyes, at the woman she was becoming, brave and smart and full of dreams. I don't know, sweetheart. I think you should. Why? Maya picked up one of the drawings. It showed a training room filled with flight simulators, young people learning to navigate cockpits. Because then other kids like me can learn about flying. Kids whose daddies don't know about airplanes. Kids who don't have notebooks or pencils or anyone to teach them. She looked up at him. You could be their teacher, Daddy. You could show them how to touch the sky. Daniel's vision blurred. When did you get so wise? I learned from you. He pulled her close, held her tight. And for the first time in 5 years, he let himself imagine a future. The next 3 weeks were a blur. Daniel was discharged from the hospital after 8 days. His burns were healing well. His hands were bandaged but functional. The doctors said he'd have scars, more scars to add to the collection, but nothing that would limit his mobility. The media frenzy was harder to heal from. Reporters camped outside his apartment building. Interview requests piled up faster than he could ignore them. His phone rang constantly, unknown numbers, old military contacts, people claiming to be distant relatives he'd never heard of. He ignored all of it. Instead, he focused on Maya, walked her to school, helped with her homework, took her to the park on weekends, and watched her run through the grass like she didn't have a care in the world. He was doing that sitting on a bench while Maya played when Marcus found him. You're a hard man to track down. Daniel didn't look up. I'm trying to be. Marcus sat beside him. Victoria's getting impatient. She's been calling my office every day, asking if you've made a decision about the center. I'm thinking about it. It's been 3 weeks. I'm a slow thinker. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know, he said finally. I've known a lot of men like you. Men who did incredible things and then disappeared. Men who couldn't handle peacetime because war was the only place they felt alive. That's not me. No. Then what is it? Daniel watched Maya climb the jungle gym. Fearless, determined, so much like her mother. I'm scared, he said quietly. Of what? Of wanting something again. Of letting myself believe that I could have more than this. He gestured at the park, the bench, his ordinary life. For 5 years, I've told myself that being Maya's father is enough. That I don't need anything else. That wanting more would just lead to more loss. And now Victoria's offering me everything I gave up. A purpose, a mission, a chance to matter again. Daniel's voice cracked. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to take it. Marcus was silent for a long moment. You know what I think? What? I think you've been playing it safe for so long that you've forgotten what courage feels like. Not the battlefield kind, you've got plenty of that. The other kind. The kind that says yes to something even though it might hurt. The kind that opens your heart even though it might break. He stood up. That little girl over there, she's going to grow up whether you take the job or not. The question is, what kind of father does she grow up with? The one who hid from the world, or the one who showed her that it's okay to try again? He walked away. Daniel sat on the bench watching his daughter play, thinking about everything he'd lost, and everything he might gain. That night he made a phone call. Victoria, it's Daniel. Silence on the other end. Then, I was starting to think you'd disappeared again. I thought about it. And, he took a breath. Tell me more about this training center. He could hear the smile in her voice. Come to my office tomorrow. I'll show you everything. Okay. Daniel. Yeah. Thank you. For calling. For considering this. Her voice softened. For giving me a chance to make things right. He hung up. Maya was standing in the doorway watching him. Was that the lady who used to be mean? Yeah, sweetheart. What did she want? Daniel looked at his daughter, at her mother's eyes, at the future stretching out before them, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. She wants to build something that helps people like us. Are you going to help her? I think so. Maya smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. Good. Why good? Because you're better when you're helping people, Daddy. You're happier. Daniel pulled her close. When did you get so smart? I told you. I learned from you. Victoria's office looked different in daylight. The first time Daniel had been here, he'd been terrified, a janitor summoned by an angry CEO expecting to be fired. Now he walked in like he belonged. Because maybe he did. Victoria was waiting for him, the architectural drawings spread across a massive table. Models of buildings, budget projections, timelines. You came. I said I would. She smiled. It reached her eyes now. I wasn't sure. After everything that happened, I realized something. Daniel walked to the table, looking at the drawings. You said you wanted to build something your father would be proud of. Something that honors what I sacrificed. Yes. He looked up at her. What about what you sacrifice? What about what you honor? Victoria frowned. What do you mean? This isn't just about me, Victoria, or your father, or the company. Daniel picked up a model of the training center. This is about you, about the kind of leader you want to be, about the legacy you want to leave. I know that. Do you? He set the model down. Because from where I'm standing, you're still trying to be Sterling Lang, still trying to fill shoes that were never meant to fit you. Victoria's face tightened. That's not. It is. And I understand why. I spent 5 years trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to pretend that Captain Cross was dead and Daniel the janitor was all that remained. He stepped closer. But Maya taught me something. Something I should have learned a long time ago. What? That you can't separate who you were from who you are. You can only integrate them, accept them, use them to become something better. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. Daniel took her hand. But maybe we can figure it out together. She stared at him. At this man who'd cleaned her floors and saved her company and run into fire for his daughter. This man who'd humiliated her and forgiven her and somehow impossibly become her friend. Together, she repeated. Partners. Not employer and employee, not hero and CEO, partners. Victoria squeezed his hand. I'd like that. Good. Daniel let go and turned back to the drawings. Now show me what you're planning, and don't leave anything out. They talked for hours. About the training center, about the curriculum, about scholarships and mentorship programs and partnerships with military organizations, about Victoria's vision and Daniel's experience and the gap between dreams and reality. Maya joined them after school, brought by Marcus. She'd been doing that a lot lately, spending time with Victoria, asking questions, sharing her drawings. The two of them had developed an unlikely bond. Miss Victoria, look. Maya held up her notebook. I designed a new kind of jet. It's solar-powered. Victoria studied the drawing seriously. Tell me about the engine placement. Maya launched into a detailed explanation involving turbines and thermal efficiency. Victoria listened intently, asking questions, offering suggestions. Daniel watched them from across the room. 2 weeks ago, Victoria Lang had thrown a mop at his chest and called him nothing. Now she was crouched beside his daughter discussing aerospace engineering like it was the most important conversation in the world. People could change. He'd almost forgotten that. Later, after Maya had fallen asleep on Victoria's couch, Daniel and Victoria stood by the window, looking out at the runway where the Apex prototype had once stood. We're going to rebuild it, Victoria said. The jet, better this time, safer. Good. The Pentagon still wants their demonstration, but I told them we're not rushing anything, not anymore. Daniel nodded. I've been thinking, Victoria said slowly, about what you said, about integrating who I was with who I am. And I think I've been so afraid of failing that I forgot why I wanted to succeed in the first place. She turned to face him. My father didn't build this company to make money. He built it because he believed in something. He believed that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if someone just gave them the chance. He was right. I know that now. Victoria's voice dropped. Because of you. Daniel looked at her. At the woman she was becoming. Not Sterling Lang's daughter. Not the Ice Queen CEO. Something new. Something real. You're going to be okay, he said. How do you know? Because you're not trying to be someone else anymore. You're trying to be yourself. He smiled. That's all any of us can do. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at Daniel. The contractors. They want to break ground on the training center next month. That's fast. I told them it was a priority. She hesitated. There's one more thing I need to ask you. What? The opening ceremony. When the center is finished, I want you to give a speech. Daniel's stomach dropped. A speech. Nothing long. Just tell your story. Tell people why this matters. I'm not good at speeches. You're good at truth. That's all anyone needs. Daniel thought about the press conferences, the interviews, the endless requests he'd ignored. He hated being in the spotlight, hated the attention. But this was different. This wasn't about fame. It was about purpose. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. Victoria smiled. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. He looked at his daughter still sleeping on the couch, at the drawings spread across the table, at the future taking shape around them. Thank you for giving me something worth fighting for again. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the runway. Two people who'd started as enemies. Two people who'd found something unexpected in each other. Two people who were finally ready to stop running and start building. The reckoning was over. Now came the hard part. Now came the future. 1 year later, the Sterling Cross Center opened its doors. Daniel stood at the entrance wearing a suit for the first time in 6 years. The tie felt like a noose around his neck. The shoes pinched his feet. Everything about this moment felt foreign and familiar at the same time. "Daddy, you look weird." Maya stood beside him, wearing a blue dress that Victoria had bought her. Her hair was braided, something Mrs. Rodriguez had done that morning, while Daniel fumbled with his cufflinks. "Thanks, sweetheart." "I mean weird in a good way. Like when superheroes take off their costumes and pretend to be normal people." Daniel laughed. "I'm not a superhero." "You are to me." The words hit him the way they always did, straight to the heart. A year ago, he'd been mopping floors and hiding from the world. A year ago, he'd convinced himself that being invisible was the same as being safe. A year ago, he'd forgotten what it felt like to want something. Now he stood in front of a building with his name on it. The Sterling Cross Center. 60,000 square feet of training facilities, flight simulators, classrooms, and workshops. A place where veterans could find new careers, where underprivileged kids could learn to dream, where ordinary people could discover that they were capable of extraordinary things. Victoria had made it happen. Every permit, every contract, every impossible deadline, she'd pushed through all of it with a determination that reminded Daniel of her father. But she wasn't Sterling Lang anymore. She was something better, something her own. "You ready?" Marcus appeared beside him, tablet in hand. "The crowd's getting restless." Daniel looked through the glass doors at the auditorium inside. 300 people. Journalists, politicians, veterans, students from schools across the state, all waiting to hear him speak. No. Good. The best speeches come from people who don't think they're ready. That doesn't make any sense. Welcome to public speaking. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got this. Just tell them the truth." The truth. Daniel had spent 5 years running from the truth, hiding it, burying it under uniforms and mops and the daily grind of survival. Now he was supposed to stand in front of 300 people and lay it bare. "Daddy?" Maya tugged his hand. "I wrote something for you, in case you forget what to say." She held up a piece of paper. Daniel took it. 3 words written in purple crayon: "You are enough." His throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Mom used to say that to you, when you came home from work and looked tired. I heard her once when I was supposed to be sleeping." Daniel stared at the words. Elena's voice echoed in his memory, soft and sure, and full of faith he'd never felt in himself. "You are enough." He'd forgotten. For 5 years he'd forgotten. "Okay," he said. "Let's do this." The auditorium fell silent when Daniel walked in. He felt every eye on him as he made his way to the stage. The journalists with their cameras. The politicians with their calculating smiles. The veterans in the front row, some missing limbs, some carrying invisible wounds that would never fully heal. His people, his tribe, the ones who understood without being told. Victoria met him at the podium. She was wearing white today, a far cry from the black armor she'd hidden behind a year ago. Her eyes were bright. Her smile was real. "They're all here for you," she said quietly. "They're here for the free food." She laughed. "Maybe, but they're staying for you." She stepped back. Daniel gripped the podium, looked out at the crowd. 300 faces, 300 stories, 300 people waiting for him to say something that mattered. He thought about his prepared speech, the one Victoria's team had written, the one full of statistics and mission statements and carefully crafted phrases designed to inspire without revealing too much. Then he thought about Maya's note. "You are enough." He set aside the prepared speech. "A year ago," he said, "I was a janitor." The room stirred. This wasn't in the program. "I mopped floors. I emptied trash cans. I tried to be invisible because I believed that's all I deserved to be." He paused. "I was wrong." He looked at the veterans in the front row. "I know some of you. Not personally, but I know you. I know what it feels like to serve your country, and then come home to nothing. I know what it feels like to have skills that no one values. I know what it feels like to look in the mirror and see a stranger." His voice cracked. "I spent 5 years hiding from who I was. I told myself that Captain Daniel Cross died in a hospital bombing in Kandahar, that the man who survived the man with the nerve damage and the dead wife and the daughter he couldn't provide for was someone else entirely." He gripped the podium tighter. But that was a lie. The same lie we all tell ourselves when we're too afraid to face the truth. The lie that says our best days are behind us, that we're broken beyond repair, that we don't deserve to want more. He found Maya in the crowd. She was sitting next to Victoria, her notebook open on her lap. "My daughter taught me something this year, something I should have learned a long time ago. She taught me that being enough isn't about what you accomplish or how many medals you earn or how high you climb. It's about showing up, every day, even when you're scared, even when you don't know the answer, even when the whole world tells you that you're not qualified to breathe the same air as the people who matter." He smiled. "My daughter is 10 years old, and she's smarter than I'll ever be." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. "This center, the Sterling Cross Center, isn't about me. It's not about Victoria Lang or her father or any single person who made it possible. It's about all of you. Every veteran who's been told they're unemployable. Every kid who's been told they're not college material. Every dreamer who's been laughed at for wanting something they weren't supposed to want." He stood straighter. "I spent 15 years flying jets and saving lives. I have medals I never wear and commendations I never talk about. But the bravest thing I ever did wasn't in a cockpit or an operating room. The bravest thing I ever did was pick up that mop and show up to work every day for my daughter. The bravest thing I ever did was admit that I needed help." He looked at Victoria. "Someone gave me that help. Someone who had every reason to look past me and chose to see me instead. Someone who reminded me that falling isn't failure, it's just the first step toward getting back up." Victoria's eyes were wet. "This center is a promise that no one who walks through these doors will ever be invisible again. A promise that your past doesn't define your future. A promise that you are enough exactly as you are exactly where you are to start again." He stepped back from the podium. "My name is Daniel Cross. I was a janitor. I was a pilot. I was a surgeon. I was a husband, and I'm still a father. I've been broken and healed and broken again." He raised his head. "And I'm still here, still standing, still ready to fly." The applause started slowly. 1 person, then 10, then the whole room. 300 people on their feet clapping and cheering for a man who'd spent 5 years convinced he didn't matter. Daniel stood at the podium, tears streaming down his face, and let himself feel it. The pride, the relief, the overwhelming gratitude for a second chance he'd never expected to receive. Maya broke through the crowd and ran to the stage. Daniel caught her, lifted her up, held her close. "You did it, Daddy." "We did it, sweetheart, all of us." Victoria joined them a moment later. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just stood beside them, her hand on Daniel's shoulder, her smile saying everything words couldn't. The cameras flashed, the journalists shouted questions, the politicians jostled for position. But Daniel didn't hear any of it. All he heard was his daughter's voice. "You are enough." The reception lasted 4 hours. Daniel shook hands until his palm went numb. He posed for photographs until his face ached from smiling. He answered the same questions over and over about his service, about the bombing, about the fire, about Victoria. Through it all, Maya stayed by his side. "Daddy, that man wants to talk to you." Daniel looked where she was pointing. A young man in a wheelchair, maybe 25, missing both legs below the knee, was trying to navigate through the crowd. "Excuse me?" Daniel said to the senator he'd been talking to. "I'll be right back." He walked over to the young man, crouched down to eye level. "Daniel Cross, sir." "Just Daniel." The young man's eyes were wet. "I saw your speech. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" For saying what I needed to hear. The young man looked down at his legs, or where his legs used to be. I lost these in Afghanistan, IED, 2 years ago. Everyone keeps telling me I'm a hero, but I don't feel like one. I feel like nothing. The young man nodded. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat beside him. What's your name? Torres, James Torres. James, can I tell you something? Yes, sir. You're not nothing. You're just lost. Daniel leaned forward. I was lost too. For 5 years. I convinced myself that the man I used to be, the pilot, the surgeon, the soldier, was dead. That the only thing left was a shell that could push a mop and pretend to be alive. He put his hand on James's shoulder. But shells don't feel pain. Shells don't grieve. Shells don't look at their reflection and wonder who's looking back. He met the young man's eyes. You're not a shell, James. You're a person who's been through hell and survived. That's not nothing. That's everything. James's tears fell freely now. I don't know how to start over. Neither did I, but I had help. And now you do too. Daniel gestured at the building around them. This place, everything in it is for people like you, like us. People who need a chance to find themselves again. He stood up. When you're ready, not now, not tomorrow, but when you're ready, come back here. Apply for the program. Let us help you find your wings again. James wiped his eyes. What if I can't? You can. Daniel smiled. I know because I did, and I'm nobody special. You're wrong about that, sir. Maybe, but I've learned that being special isn't about what you accomplish. It's about what you overcome. He shook James's hand. I'll see you soon, soldier. Yes, sir, you will. Daniel walked away. When he looked back, James Torres was sitting straighter in his wheelchair. His eyes were still wet, but there was something else there now. Hope. The same hope Daniel had found when he'd stopped hiding and started living. Maya found him on the roof an hour later. The reception was winding down. Most of the guests had left. Victoria was still inside handling the last of the press interviews and donor meetings. Daniel stood at the edge of the roof, looking out at the runway, where a row of training jets sat waiting. Daddy! He turned. Hey, sweetheart, how'd you find me? Miss Victoria said you always disappear when things get too loud. She said to check high places. He laughed. She knows me too well. Maya walked over and stood beside him. For a long moment, they just looked at the sky together. Daddy, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you miss flying? The question hit him like it always did, like a punch to a bruise that never quite healed. Every day. Why don't you fly anymore? You know why, sweetheart. My hands. The nerve damage. But your hands work now. You can hold things. You can write. You can catch me when I jump off the swing. Flying's different. You need precision, control. One wrong move and what? Daniel looked at his hands. The scars were still there. The tremor was still there, faint, barely noticeable, but there. And people could die. Maya was quiet for a moment. Miss Victoria said you flew through a sandstorm to save her daddy. She said no one else would try because it was too dangerous. That was a long time ago. She said you were the best pilot she ever heard of. She said her daddy told her that if anyone could fly through the impossible, it was you. Daniel's chest tightened. What are you trying to say, sweetheart? Maya looked up at him with those serious eyes, her mother's eyes. I'm trying to say that maybe you stopped flying because you were scared, not because you couldn't. The words hung in the air. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to explain that it wasn't fear, it was practicality, that his hands weren't reliable, that the risk was too great. But Maya wasn't done. You told all those people downstairs that falling isn't failure, that you just have to get back up. She took his hand. But you never got back up, Daddy. You stopped flying and you never tried again. Maya, I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying, you always tell me I can do anything if I try hard enough. But you don't believe that about yourself. Daniel stared at his daughter. 10 years old. Wiser than any adult he'd ever met. When did you get so smart? He whispered. I learned from watching you fall and get back up. Every day, even when it was hard. She squeezed his hand. Maybe it's time to fall one more time. Just to prove you still can. Daniel looked at the training jets on the runway. Sleek, beautiful, waiting. He thought about Elena, about the last thing she'd said to him before he deployed to Kandahar. Come back to me. But if you can't come back the same, come back different. Just come back. He'd come back different. So different that he'd barely recognized himself. But he'd never really come back at all. Okay, he said. Maya's eyes widened. Okay, what? Okay, I'll try. One flight, just to see. Really? Really? He crouched down and held her shoulders. But if I crash and burn, you have to promise not to say, I told you so. Maya grinned. No promises. The next morning, Daniel walked into the training center's flight simulation room. Marcus was waiting for him. Victoria told me you might show up. Did she also tell you I might throw up? She mentioned that too. Marcus gestured to the simulator, a full-motion cockpit replica that could recreate any flight condition from calm skies to hurricane winds. Start small. Simulator first. Real thing later. What if I can't do it? Then you can't do it. But at least you'll know. Marcus handed him a helmet. That's better than wondering. Daniel took the helmet. It felt strange in his hands. Heavy. Familiar. He climbed into the simulator. The cockpit wrapped around him like a second skin. The controls were different from the jets he'd flown, newer, more advanced, but the basics were the same. Stick, throttle, instruments, the language of flight. He gripped the controls. His hands trembled. Just breathe. Marcus's voice came through the headset. Take your time. There's no pressure here. Daniel closed his eyes. He thought about Kandahar, about the sandstorm, about the moment he'd decided to fly into the impossible because a man's daughter needed her father to come home. He thought about Elena, about Maya, about everything he'd lost and everything he'd found. Then he opened his eyes, pushed the throttle forward, and flew. The simulation lasted 47 minutes. Daniel flew through clear skies and turbulent storms. He executed maneuvers he hadn't attempted in 6 years. He pushed the virtual aircraft to its limits and then pushed further. His hands shook, but they held. His nerves screamed, but they obeyed. When he finally landed the simulator and climbed out, his legs were trembling and his face was wet with tears. Marcus was waiting. Well, Daniel looked at his hands. The same hands that couldn't hold a cup of water 5 years ago. The same hands that had pushed a mop for months while pretending they'd forgotten how to fly. I can still do it. I know. How? Marcus smiled. Because you never really lost it. You just convinced yourself you had. Daniel leaned against the simulator, suddenly exhausted. Now what? Now you decide. Do you want to fly again? Really fly? Or was this just about proving something to yourself? Daniel thought about it. He thought about the training center, the students, the veterans like James Torres who needed someone to show them that second chances were real. He thought about Maya, about the promise he had made to raise her right, to be there for her every day. He thought about Victoria, about the partnership they'd built, about the future they were creating together. Both, he said finally. Both what? I want to fly again, but not the way I used to. Daniel stood straighter. I want to teach. I want to show people that even when you think you've lost everything, you can still find your way back to the sky. Marcus nodded slowly. I think that can be arranged. The first class of the Sterling Cross Center graduated 6 months later. 32 students. Veterans, teenagers, single mothers, former inmates. People from every background imaginable, united by a single dream to touch the sky. Daniel taught half of them himself. Flight theory, emergency procedures, the mental discipline required to stay calm when everything went wrong. He was a natural teacher, patient, precise, able to break down complex concepts into simple truths, just like his instructors had done for him decades ago. Maya sat in the front row at the graduation ceremony. 12 years old now, taller, smarter, still carrying her notebook everywhere she went. Victoria sat beside her holding a program with Daniel's face on the cover. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, "please welcome the director of the Sterling Cross Flight Academy, Captain Daniel Cross." Daniel walked to the podium. This time the suit didn't feel like a prison. The tie didn't feel like a noose. He'd worn them enough times now that they'd become part of him. Just like flying. Just like teaching. Just like being a father. "When I started this journey," he said, "I was convinced that my best days were behind me. I was wrong. My best days were still ahead. I just hadn't met them yet." He looked at the graduates. "Today you join a family. Not because of what you've accomplished, but because of what you've overcome. Every single one of you has a story of failure, of loss, of being told that you weren't good enough." He smiled. "Those stories don't end here. They begin here. Because now you have something you didn't have before: proof. Proof that you can fall and get back up. Proof that your past doesn't define your future. Proof that you are enough." He stepped back from the podium. "Now go. Touch the sky. And when you land, help someone else do the same." The applause was thunderous. Daniel watched his students throw their caps in the air, watched them hug each other, cry, laugh. Watched James Torres, now walking on prosthetic legs he'd trained himself to use, shake hands with the young woman who'd helped him through the hardest days. Victoria appeared beside him. "Not bad for a janitor." He laughed. "Not bad for an ice queen." She punched his arm. "I was never an ice queen. You threw a mop at me." "I was having a bad day. A bad year, more like." She smiled. "Maybe, but I got better." We both did. They stood in silence watching the celebration. "My father would have loved this," Victoria said quietly. "He does love it, wherever he is." "You believe that?" Daniel thought about Elena, about the voicemails he still listened to sometimes, about the sense he had, irrational but unshakable, that she was watching him, proud of him, still waiting for him to come home. "Yeah," he said, "I believe that." Maya ran up to them, her notebook clutched against her chest. "Daddy?" "Miss Victoria, did you see James walked across the whole stage without his crutches?" "We saw, sweetheart." "And Maria, the one who was scared of heights, she got her pilot's license. She said you helped her daddy. She said you told her that fear is just courage that hasn't found its purpose yet." Daniel smiled. "Did I say that? You say a lot of things. I write them all down." Maya held up her notebook. "I have 17 notebooks now, all full of things you've said." Victoria laughed. 17. He talks a lot when he thinks no one's listening. Daniel pulled his daughter close. "I always know you're listening. That's why I say the good stuff." Maya hugged him back. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky." Later that night, Daniel stood alone on the runway. The celebration had ended hours ago. The students had gone home. Victoria had retreated to her office to handle the inevitable paperwork. But Daniel wasn't ready to leave. He walked to the end of the runway where the training jets sat in a perfect row. He ran his hand along the fuselage of the nearest one, smooth metal, cool to the touch, humming with potential. 6 years ago, he'd thought his flying days were over. Now he flew twice a week. Not combat missions. Not death-defying rescues. Just training flights with students who needed to see that their instructor practiced what he preached. His hands still trembled, but they held. His nerves still screamed, but they obeyed. He looked up at the sky, clear tonight, stars everywhere. The same stars that had guided him through sandstorms and firefights and the darkest nights of his soul. "Hey, Elena?" He hadn't called her voicemail in months. He didn't need to anymore. But sometimes when he was alone, he still talked to her. "I did it. I found my way back. Not to the man I used to be, he's gone. But to someone new. Someone better. Someone who finally understands what you meant when you said I was enough." He smiled. "Maya's doing great. She's got your brains and my stubbornness. She's going to change the world someday. I can feel it." The wind picked up, rustled his hair, almost like a hand brushing against his cheek. "I miss you. Every day. But I'm not lost anymore. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He took a deep breath. "Thank you. For loving me. For believing in me. For giving me a daughter who taught me how to live again." He looked at the sky one last time. "I'll see you when I see you. But not for a while. I've still got work to do." Footsteps behind him. Daniel turned. Maya stood at the edge of the runway holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Mrs. Rodriguez said you'd be out here. She made this for you." Daniel took the cup. "How'd you get here?" "Miss Victoria drove me. She said you shouldn't be alone tonight." Maya sat down on the tarmac, cross-legged, her cup warming her hands. She was right. Daniel sat beside her. They drank their hot chocolate in silence, watching the stars. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think Mom can see us?" Daniel looked up at the sky, at the millions of points of light scattered across the darkness. "Yeah, baby. I think she can." "Do you think she's proud?" "I know she is." Maya leaned against his shoulder. "I'm proud too, Daddy. Of everything you did. Of who you are." Daniel's throat tightened. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." "I know," Maya grinned. "I'm pretty great." He laughed, pulled her close. "Yeah, sweetheart, you really are." They sat there until the hot chocolate was gone and the stars started to fade. Father and daughter. Survivor and dreamer. 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Daniel looked at the training jets. At the center bearing his name. At the daughter who'd given him a reason to keep going. He thought about the janitor he'd been. The pilot he'd lost. The teacher he'd become. He thought about Victoria's transformation. About Marcus's faith. About James Torres walking across that stage on legs that shouldn't exist. He thought about Elena. About the love that had never really died. About the promise he'd made to come back different if he couldn't come back the same. He'd come back different. He'd come back better. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Cross knew exactly who he was. Not a hero, not a janitor, not a pilot or a surgeon or any single thing. Just a father. A teacher. A man who'd learned that falling wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The sun rose over the Sterling Cross Center, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Daniel stood up, offered his hand to his daughter. "Ready to go home?" Maya took his hand, smiled her mother's smile. "Ready." They walked together toward the building, toward the future they'd built from the ashes of the past. Daniel Cross had spent 5 years believing he was nothing. Now he knew the truth. He was enough. He had always been enough. And that was more than he ever needed to be.